The dread that hit me would normally be a feeling of joy. In a normal world it would be, but our world is anything but normal. The Moors are having a baby. I glanced up from the metal table so fast my neck hurt. What? I asked. My wife kept her voice low. They got the approval. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the concrete floor of the bunker. Around us, several people looked up before quickly pretending not to listen. Nobody liked conversations about the lottery. Nobody liked being reminded how fragile life had become underground. My wife lowered her eyes. The paperwork came through this morning, she whispered. That's what I heard. I leaned back against the cold steel bench and closed my eyes. Joanna volunteered, she continued. Poor Joanna, I thought. She's only 52, I muttered. A bead of sweat rolled down the side of my face. Even after 16 years underground, the bunker still smelled faintly of concrete dust, recycled air, and bleach. Perpetuum Technologies had promised humanity salvation. A self-sustaining underground sanctuary capable of housing 1,000 people until the service became livable again after the nuclear war. 1,000 exactly. Not one more, not one less. At first, people had praised the system. Strict population equilibrium, controlled resources, no overcrowding, no famine, no collapse. Every birth required a death. That was the agreement. When someone reached a certain age or developed severe illness, they could volunteer for reclamation. The remaining nutrient allotments, oxygen shares, and living space would be reassigned to the next generation. That was how humanity survived. At least, that was the lie they told us. I remembered when we first entered the bunker, sirens screaming overhead, the sky burning orange, people clawing at the blast doors as they silted shut, children crying, soldiers dragging screaming families away from the entrance because the bunker had already reached capacity. I still hear those screams at night. Sometimes I think everyone down here does. But nobody talks about it anymore. Down here, silence became a survival instinct. The bunker was divided into sectors: residential, hydroponics, water purification, medical, and beneath all of it, reclamation. Nobody likes saying the word out loud. The official explanation was simple. Bodies were recycled to maximize survival efficiency. Nothing wasted, not water, not tissue, not bone. It horrified people at first. Then hunger happened. Fear happened. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. A soft chime echoed through the cafeteria speakers. Conversation stopped instantly. Population adjustment ceremony beginning in 30 minutes, the automated voice announced calmly. Attendance mandatory. A pit formed in my stomach. My wife stared down at her untouched food. I heard Joanna volunteered, she said quietly. My wife said, I'm surprised Joanna volunteered. I looked at her sharply. No, I'm not so sure she did anymore. She signed the papers herself. That doesn't make sense. The Moors had spent nearly 12 years applying for reproductive clearance, 12 years of psychological evaluations, medical screenings, genetic compatibility testing, only to finally receive approval after Joanna volunteered for reclamation. Something about it felt wrong. Very wrong. The ceremony hall was already packed by the time we arrived. 1,000 chairs arranged in perfect rows. 1,000 citizens. Always counted, always monitored. A giant digital display glowed overhead. Current population, 1,000. The administrator stepped onto the platform. Tall, pale, perfectly composed. I had never once seen him sweat. Today, he announced, we celebrate continuity. Polite applause filled the room. Forced. Mechanical, you could say. Thanks to the noble sacrifice of citizen Joanna Moore, authorization for new life has been approved. More applause. Then Joanna walked onto the stage. She looked impossibly small beneath the white overhead light. Her gray hair had been tied neatly behind her head. She smiled, but her eyes looked hollow. Terrified even. The administrator placed a hand on her shoulder. Citizen Joanna Moore has chosen reclamation so that her son and daughter-in-law may welcome a child into the future of humanity. The crowd applauded harder this time. Some people even stood. I couldn't. Joanna's gaze drifted across the audience. For one brief second, her eyes met mine, and I realized something. She was silently begging for help. Then the guards escorted her away, and the ceremony ended. 3 days later, Joanna disappeared from the residential sector entirely. Her room was reassigned before sunrise. Her belongings removed, her records archived, as if she had never existed. That night, I woke to a strange sound inside the ventilation ducts above our room. scratching, weak but rhythmic. At first I thought it was my imagination. Then I heard it again, scratch, scratch, scratch. My wife rolled over beside me. "You hear that?" she whispered. Before I could answer, a voice drifted faintly through the vent. "Help me!" I froze. The scratching stopped. Then came a wet, choking sound, followed by sobbing. I scrambled out of bed and pressed my ear against the vent. "Joanna!" I whispered. Silence. Then suddenly, they lied. The voice sounded weak, broken, barely human. My wife yanked me away from the vent. "Stop," she hissed. But I couldn't stop the dread bubbling up in me, because reclamation wasn't supposed to leave anyone alive. The next morning, I tried reporting what I heard. The administrator smiled politely. "Stress hallucinations are common among long-term residents," he explained. His expression never changed. "Citizen Joanna Moore completed reclamation procedure successfully." Then what did I hear? He folded his hands calmly. "Surely you were hearing things." That should have been the end of it, but the noises continued, always after lights out. Whispers in the walls, scratching beneath the floors, soft crying echoing through the pipes. Others began hearing it too. Nobody admitted it publicly, but you could see it in their faces. People stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped trusting leadership. Then people started disappearing that weren't volunteers for reclamation. Not many, one every few months though, always quietly explained away. Either it was ventilation accidents, equipment failures, or some unauthorized sector breaches. But one night I saw something with my own eyes. I was returning from hydroponics when I noticed two security guards dragging a small figure down the maintenance corridor. A young woman, maybe 20 years old. She was kicking and screaming. "No! Please! I don't want to go below!" One guard noticed me watching. The look in his eyes made my blood run cold. Because it wasn't anger, it was pity. That night I made a terrible decision. I followed the maintenance tunnels, past water filtration, past waste processing, past the marked boundaries civilians were forbidden to cross. Eventually I reached a rusted security door labeled Reclamation Sublevel. The door wasn't fully shut. Warm air drifted out, and beneath it I heard whispering. Hundreds of voices whispered somewhere in the darkness below. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Rot. Blood and chemicals. The hallway stretched downward farther than I could see, and along the walls were handprints, thousands of them. Some fresh, some dried dark brown. At the bottom of the stairs I found rows of containment rooms, glass cells. Human figures moved weakly inside them, starved, mutilated, but alive. My stomach twisted. Joanna sat inside one of the cells, or what was left of her did. Tubes ran into her arms, parts of her skin were missing. Machines harvested fluids from her body while keeping her alive. When her eyes opened and locked onto mine, I nearly yelled. "Please," she mouthed. I stumbled backward, then a voice echoed behind me. "You were never meant to see this." The administrator stood at the top of the stairs, completely calm. "Reclamation is not death," he explained. "Death wastes resources." I stared at him in horror. "You keep them alive? For as long as possible." He stepped closer. "The bunker cannot sustain 1,000 people indefinitely through agriculture alone. It never could." My blood went cold. All these years? We survived because every citizen continues contributing after reclamation. Screams echoed faintly through the lower chambers. The administrator smiled. "Humanity required sacrifice." I ran. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I don't remember reaching her quarters, but I remember my wife's face when I told her, because she didn't look surprised. She looked defeated. "I knew," she whispered. I stared at her. "You knew?" "Not all of it. How long did you know?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Since the first year underground," she said. The room spun around me. "You let this happen? What choice did we have?" she shouted suddenly. "You think anyone survives if people panic?" She grabbed my arm. "They told us the surface is still poison. They told us there's nowhere else to go." "And you believe them?" I snapped back. Her silence answered me. The next morning, alarms began blaring throughout the bunker. Residents flooded the corridors in confusion. Then the speakers crackled. "Population discrepancy detected." A long pause followed. "Current population, 1,001. Every face around me went pale. 1,000 exactly, not one more, not one less. Then came another announcement. "The Moor infant has been delivered successfully." People began whispering, panicking. Someone started crying, because everybody understood what came next. Another reclamation, another sacrifice. And then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the bunker. and from somewhere deep below us, we heard screaming. Not one voice, hundreds. The walls began shaking violently. People fell to the floor. Emergency lights flickered on dimly. And for the first time in 16 years, the sealed blast doors at the far end of the bunker slowly began to open. Fresh air rushed inside. Cold, clean, real. Everyone froze. The surface air wasn't toxic. It never had been. The administrator's voice finally broke over the speakers. Remain calm. Then the screaming below became deafening. Containment doors had opened. The reclaimed were loose. Starred figures poured from the lower tunnels. Some crawled, some limped, some barely looked human anymore. But all of them were alive, and all of them remembered. Panic erupted instantly. People ran toward the surface, others were dragged screaming into the darkness. The last thing I saw before reaching the blast doors was Joanna, standing at the end of the corridor, broken, bleeding, but smiling, because after 16 years underground, humanity was finally free, even if almost none of us deserved to survive.